Yeah, I just want to congratulate SPAFA on their 50-year anniversary and a long history of extraordinary contributions in the field. Thank you for me there. And in those years, I think a lot of us who were publishing in Asian theater journals and similar, and of course in SPAFA, we were so concerned about the disappearance of forms that we felt there was this critical need to document them. And all we had were grainy videos, and we wanted to get to the people who were doing it, to the master practitioners of the form, and we wanted to document the detail of this stuff and the cultural context in which it was situated. So I think we're really far from that now. I don't think there's that same kind of necessity. In part because the forms have moved, they've circulated, we've got the internet, there's a lot of international there's a lot of local circulation of forms. I mean, like in the Philippines, all these dance forms that are local, well, people they bring this out. And, everybody's got one of these in the Philippines. And then it's a YouTube video 10 minutes later, and then it's got 1,000 hits. It may not be good quality, but none of these forms could circulate in that way back in those days. I mean, so much, and also, I mean, another huge change is just simply that there are more Asian theater scholars that are circulating internationally, and that have been trained at Western universities, and many of them, of course, have stayed on, many of them have gone back home. So there is this vast international network of people who are documenting fields. Like, here's just one example. Well, it's also about how these arts are taken up by younger people, and I mean, for instance, let's just start with the dialect, the so-called dialect forms of Jingju, of Chinese opera. It's like, I remember, we were all talking about how they're going to die, right? It's like, who's going to go to Hokkien or Teochew or Cantonese opera? I lived in Singapore at the time, and I would go to the Kreta Air people's, art theater, and I would see these forms, and it would be me and 70-year-old women that died 30 years ago. I mean that all have to be over 100 today, and it was just everyone in there was over 70 except me. Take a look, for instance, just look at the position of Cantonese opera in Hong Kong today. Right? It's like if you wander around, you wander around Hong Kong, Kowloon, and it's like there's posters up all over the place. I've been there with Cantonese speaking friends. And it's like there's a Wayang going on all the time. Young people today, or maybe they're not so young, maybe these are now people who are moving into 30s and pushing 40s. It's been around for a while, but it's like there has been a resurgence of interest in grandma's culture. It's among Cantonese people, and there are a lot of socio-political reasons for that. Why, that also have to do with the sort of, maybe it's self-exoticism too, and feeling that really it's some remove from the beauty and graciousness of some of these forms. But those forms went from being seen as old hat to being seen as central to the expression and take-up of a Cantonese identity for many people, right? So that's a huge shift. Also, the UN framework for intangible cultural heritage. I mean, that's been a huge game changer. So we could talk till the cows come home about, what that has meant, about what forms get chosen, and how political the whole thing is. But the result has been overall a much more nuanced understanding about what traditional means. Whereas, say, that framework 30 years ago was about preservation at all costs. Oh my God, Pak Hamza is dying. It's like when he died, we're like, it's the end. Well, maybe not. Maybe it's not. Actually, it isn't. I've discovered now that there are practitioners from Kelantan who are doing that form. So it didn't all sort of drop off the end of the earth at that time. And that UN framework has over time evolved into this more nuanced understanding that we don't even talk about traditional forms in the same way, right? I remember, for instance, I was thinking before we started, that trite phrase now seems trite. When we were talking about traditional forms, it was always continuity and change, right? If you go back 30 years ago and you do a search for title, continuity and change, and I'm sure I've used it. I probably used it in titles. I'm sure I did. Continuity and change in fill in the blank, right? Any traditional form. And it was, yes, there was both continuity and change, but now and we could talk to the ways in which that happened. But I think now there's a much deeper understanding of of how these forms continue to live, because not just we're celebrating them, but because there are changes within them, because there have always been changes within them, because Pak Hamza he learned from Dalong, but like he made his own modifications. And for that form to do something else to a younger audience that might be communicating through this, that's okay too, because it might involve the need for those skills, and they're just being disseminated through different media than have been the case in the past.